You know, that kind of town that seems to exist only to fill space on the map. Point Pleasant was like that. One of those small towns in West Virginia where everyone knows everyone. Where the biggest event of the year is the fair downtown, and where the silence of the night is so deep it becomes almost unsettling. I had always liked that silence. It was the kind of peace you can't find anywhere else until something came along and ruined everything. If you ask any longtime resident, they'll all give the same answer. It wasn't the first time he appeared. There had always been stories, people swearing they saw something flying over the forests or hovering above the old bridge. But nobody talked about it much. The subject was treated as superstition, a story meant to scare children, until the night I found out it wasn't a legend. I was driving home after a long, exhausting shift at the warehouse where I worked. It was nearly midnight, and the wind was strong, the kind that makes trees. Branches smack against each other like dry bones. That's when I heard it. A low sound, almost like a whistle, but prolonged, deep, coming from somewhere above. It wasn't the kind of noise the wind makes. It sounded intentional, a deep whisper, like someone was trying to call me without the rest of the world knowing. I looked through the windshield, and that's when I saw a tall, thin silhouette, with something moving slowly behind it. The wings. They unfolded in the air, but they didn't flap like a bird's. They stretched out and seemed to absorb the little light the moon offered. And then the eyes, two red dots, fixed, staring at me as if they already knew me. I should have sped up, driven away, done anything but keep looking, but it was as if my body had forgotten how to move. And that's when it started descending. I couldn't look away. It was as if every fiber of my body was being pressed, forced to stay there, staring at that impossible figure. The wind, which had sounded like a constant chuhar, suddenly seemed to have quieted, as if all the air had been sucked into that being. The surrounding trees were motionless, and the only sound left was that deep whisper repeated in a rhythm, like a breath that belonged to nothing human. The most unsettling part was that it didn't move abruptly. On the contrary, it descended slowly, as if it had all the time in the world, as if it knew I wasn't going anywhere. I slid back in the seat, instinctively gripping the steering wheel. Car was still running, but it felt useless. My foot wanted to press the accelerator, but my mind each understand what I was seeing. And then it landed. It wasn't an ordinary landing. There was no sound of impact, no snapping branches. It just was there, on the ground a few meters ahead, blocking half the road. The car's headlights barely illuminated its form. The body looked humanoid, but far too tall, far too thin, and the wings, even folded, still curved upward, as if part of something much larger. The eyes didn't blink. That red seemed to pulse, not like electric light, but like something alive. That's when it tilted its head slowly, the way a crow does when it finds something that sparks its curiosity. And the whisper changed. It was no longer a single, low tone. It was as if it were repeating words. I didn't recognize the language, but it sounded ancient, something that shouldn't exist in the mouth of any creature. My breathing was so fast I realized I was making too much noise. And as if it understood, it took its first step toward me. I didn't run, I didn't accelerate. I just stayed there until the headlight flickered. Once, twice, and then went completely out. Darkness fell over me like a heavy wave. The dead headlights turned the road into a tunnel of black, and the only light left came from those two red, fixed eyes. For a second, I froze. Then, my survival instinct finally kicked in. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. The Indu roared, but it felt weaker, as if something was draining its power. The car started moving, but not fast enough. The Mothman, or whatever it was, didn't run. It just rose, spreading its wings. The wingspan was so absurd, it felt like the entire sky had been taken. And then, with a single beat of its wings, it disappeared upward. I didn't know where to look at the narrow road, the rear view mirror, or above. My fingers ached from gripping the wheel so tightly. Then I heard it again. Not the whisper, but something worse. My own name, whispered, slowly, as if being blown directly into my ear, even though I was alone in the car. My heart raced. The road began to curve, and I followed it without thinking. All I wanted was to get out of there, to find any house, any sign of life. But at the end of the curve, it was there, in the middle of the road, standing as if it had been waiting for me all along. The car skidded when I hit the brakes. The sound of tires on asphalt echoed in the silence, mixed with my ragged breathing that barely seemed like my own. It didn't move. Just stood there, too tall, too thin, with those wings folded behind its back and its head slightly tilted, like a crow analyzing its prey. I don't know why, but I felt that if I tried to reverse, it would appear behind me in the blink of an eye. So the only choice was to move forward. When I accelerated, it stepped aside. Not to run away, but to let me pass. And that's when I noticed something strange. Knew that road well. I grew up there. Every curve, every side entrance, but suddenly there was an intersection that shouldn't exist. Without thinking, I turned left. The car's headlights revealed twisted trees, branches curling like fingers trying to reach the roof. The road was narrow, covered with dry leaves, and I could swear there were tracks on the ground. Not tire tracks, but something large, something that walked with long strides and claws that scraped the asphalt. Then I heard the whisper again, clearer this time. Almost there. The air inside the car grew heavy, nearly impossible to breathe, and deep down I knew this path wasn't to save me. It was to lead me straight to it. The road ended abruptly, as if swallowed by the woods decades ago. The car stopped on its own. I swear I didn't touch the brakes. The headlights lit something I didn't want to see. An old wooden bridge, darkened by moisture, covered in moss. It looked like it was hanging by a thread over a river. That seemed more like a bottomless pit. That's when I realized this bridge didn't exist on the map. It never had. The whisper came again. This time, so close, I felt the warmth, or was it cold, touching my ear. Now, the way the reflection of the water under the bridge was moving, but there was no wind. I didn't want to look, but I looked anyway. And what I saw was not the reflection of my face. It was the Mothman standing in the middle of the bridge, red eyes, glowing, wings, spread like black curtains. He didn't move forward. He didn't need to. I felt my legs tremble and my whole body freeze. He simply raised a hand or a claw and pointed at the water, and there, beneath the dark surface, something stirred. Something huge. Something that wasn't him. That's when I realized Point Pleasant wasn't the Mothman's home. He was just the watcher. The real horror was beneath us. My body finally responded to the panic. I turned the car key, trying to start it. The engine coughed, sputtered, but wouldn't turn over. I looked back at the bridge. He was gone. The headlights now illuminated only old wood and still water, as if nothing had happened. But I knew he was still nearby. I grabbed my phone. No signal. The screen flickered twice and shut off. Even with 70% battery. Go away! My instinct screamed. But the whisper said something else. You don't choose when it's your time. I tried to open the door to run, but it wouldn't budge. I locked and unlocked. Enough in the window wouldn't roll down either. Then I saw, in the rearview mirror, a shadow crossing the road behind the car. It wasn't just the Mothman. There were more, 3, maybe 4, tall silhouettes with eyes glowing in the dark. And all of them were coming toward me. My heart raced. The engine finally roared to life. I shifted into gear and accelerated without looking back. The road seemed longer now, and no matter how fast I drove, the trees never ended. The GPS, even without signal, flashed a single phrase on the screen. You are still in Point Pleasant. The road seemed to repeat. Same trees, same curve, same wooden posts with a single dangling wire. I looked at the speedometer. 90 kilometers per hour. I was flying, and yet getting nowhere. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and there was only emptiness. But the feeling of being watched was so strong that I began to sweat cold. Then I noticed something even worse. The moon wasn't moving. It was as if it were glued to the same spot. In the sky, motionless, staring at me. With every kilometer, a sound came from the roof of the car. At first, it sounded like a branch tapping. Then, footsteps. I tried not to look, but a part of me knew that if I turned my head upward, I would see. The GPS blinked again. I teased, not your time yet. A figure crossed in front of the car. I slammed the brakes. The vehicle spun and stopped sideways on the road. The headlights illuminated something ahead. The bridge, the same bridge as before. The same wet wood. And he was there, standing in the center, as if he had been waiting for me all this time. The sound of my own heartbeat drowned everything else. The bridge lay before me, shrouded in fog so thick that the headlight beam dissolved just a few meters ahead. And there, in the middle, that silhouette, he didn't move. The wings were folded, yet still seemed larger than an entire car. The red glow of the eyes didn't flicker, didn't tremble. It was as if he had been carved there, waiting for me to take the first step. I knew turning back wasn't an option. Behind me, the road seemed to have vanished. The rearview mirror showed only darkness. I swallowed hard, shifted into first gear, and began to cross. The wood creaked under the tires, each sound echoing like a warning to give up. Halfway across, that's when I realized the Mothman was not alone. Something moved in the fog beside me. Footsteps, breaths, and that same phrase the GPS had shown earlier, now spoken in a deep voice. Impossible for a human to make. It's not your time yet. When I looked, I saw hands. Long hands, gray-skinned, gripping the side of the car, and with every meter I moved forward, they seemed to push me off the bridge. The car nearly went over the edge. I yanked the wheel hard, feeling the front tires scrape the edge of the wood. Then the hands vanished, not as if they had never existed. The Mothman stepped forward. The wings unfolded, and the sound wasn't feathers, it was like old leather cracking. That noise went straight down my spine. He was staring at me, not like a predator looks at prey. It was different, as if he were analyzing, weighing every decision I had ever made in life. For a moment, time stopped. The fog froze, the wind vanished, and all that remained were those red eyes. There was no mouth, yet I heard a voice inside my head. You've seen too much. An impossible cold swept through the car, and the windshield began to fog not from the inside. Outside, something formed. Words written in the mist. Go away. I knew that if I obeyed, I could leave alive. But part of me wanted to understand why. And that was the worst decision of my life. I should have turned around and fled. But instead, I started the car and moved forward. The Mothman didn't move. He just watched, motionless, like a living statue. When I passed him, the wings folded and something fell to the ground. A crumpled piece of paper. I stopped the car, hands shaking, and got out. When I bent down to pick it up, I realized it was a photograph. I was seeing it. The photo showed exactly what was happening. Me, standing on the bridge, holding that same photo, and behind me, him. I looked over my shoulder and saw no one else. The fog was dissipating, and silence had returned. But on the back of the photo, a date was written in pen. It was 1 year from now. I got in the car and drove away without looking back. I never returned to Point Pleasant, but sometimes at night, when I'm alone, I hear it. That whisper, I don't understand the words, but I know it's a reminder. The date in the photo is coming. I always believed that after that night, my life would never return to normal. But I didn't know that what was about to happen would turn everything into an even darker spiral. I returned to the Point Pleasant Bridge for a reason I can't even fully explain. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe the feeling that he was still watching me. The night was cold, with a damp wind coming. Off the Ohio River, the fog was so thick it swallowed the streetlights, leaving everything with a dull, yellowish glow. I stepped onto the wet asphalt, and the sound echoed as if I were in a tunnel. Each step seemed louder than normal, as if the bridge itself were listening. The feeling of being watched grew slow and invasive, like water rising up to your neck. And then I heard it, a low, dragging sound. Not exactly a voice, but something like a deep murmur. Words couldn't be made out, just muffled brushing, like the wind whispering in an ancient language. My body reacted before my mind. Goosebumps rose on my arms and my muscles locked. I looked back, nothing. But when I looked forward, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the fog, a tall shadow, far taller than any man, took shape. The wings, or what I thought were wings were, folded, almost touching the ground, and the eyes weren't red like the old accounts. They were a milky white, almost blind, but they glowed with a wet light that seemed to absorb everything around. I tried to move, but my feet felt stuck to the ground. The murmur grew clearer. Now, it was as if several voices spoke at once in different directions, all coming from that being. Disconnected words, names, numbers, dates. A sequence too fast for my mind to follow. Suddenly, it moved. It didn't walk, it slid, and with each advance, the fog closed behind it as if part of its body. I instinctively stepped back, but my body hit the bridge railing. The water below was dark and moving fast. I thought about jumping, but something told me it wouldn't help. The being stopped a few meters from me. The wings spread, revealing irregular tissue like burnt leather. The wind changed. There was no smell of anything, and that absence of scent scared me more than any odor of death could. It was like being outside the world. And then it spoke, or at least, that's what my mind understood as speaking. There was no sound, just a pressure inside my head. Short sentence, echoing within me. It has already begun. The mist stirred, and when I looked again, it was gone. Only the silent bridge and the heavy fog remained. But I knew something had been left behind. I went home that night, but didn't go inside. I stayed in the car, in the dark, hands gripping the steering wheel, listening to the wind whistle past the mirrors. I stared at nothing, trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I saw. But something was wrong, very wrong. When finally mustered the courage to get out, I noticed on the side window of the car, right where my head had rested while driving, there was a mark. Not dirt, not condensation. It was an imprint, like the outline of something that had touched the glass from the inside. 5 elongated marks, like fingers but too thin, almost like bones covered in stretched skin. I ran my hand over it. Cold. Not like chilled glass. Cold like metal left in ice for hours. My instinct screamed for me to wipe it immediately, but for some reason I couldn't. It was as if erasing that mark would erase proof and deep down. I knew no one would believe me without seeing it. I went inside and headed straight to the bathroom. That's when I noticed my reflection. Or rather, something in it. The right side of my neck had a dark line, almost imperceptible, as if a shadow were stuck to my skin. I tried to rub it off, but it wouldn't budge. Each attempt made my skin more sensitive, like it was burning from the inside. That night, the dream began. I woke in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, with the feeling that someone had called my name, but no one was in the room. In my mind, I saw the figure on the bridge again, but this time, the eyes were no longer white. They were completely black, and the murmur, now clearer, repeated something that sounded like a countdown. In the days that followed, I noticed small birds appearing dead in my yard. First one, then two, then an entire group. No signs of physical attack, just lying there, as if they had fallen from the sky. That's when I realized the phrase spoken on the bridge wasn't a distant warning. It was a reminder, and if it has already begun, as he said, then something far worse is coming. The mark on the glass is still there, and every night, before I sleep, I feel him getting closer. Maybe next time I see him, there won't be a bridge, fog, or distance, only darkness. If you think all of this is just superstition, maybe you're right, but if you ever find yourself driving alone on a dark road near Point Pleasant and the wind changes its tone, I suggest you don't look back, because when the whisper comes, you'll understand it's not just a legend, it's a warning. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something no one believed? Have you ever felt watched when you were certain you were alone? Send your story, whether by message, letter, or smoke signal, but please don't summon anything weird in the process, and it might appear here on the channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss more stories like this. Until then, sleep well. And if you hear a whisper tonight, pretend it's not for you. Until the next story.